At the time of this recording, the Nintendo 3DS eShop doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon, but even so, it's only a matter of time before the dang thing kicks the bucket. And then once that eventually happens, it's gonna get a hell of a lot harder to get a hold of some of the more notable titles for anyone who's not a multi-trillionaire, thanks to how crazy some of the aftermarket prices have gotten. So if you're a fan of the 3DS and you want to have the option to play every decent game for the rest of your life, then you'd better ransack the eShop now while it's still up and running, unless your name's Bill Gates. However, with the 3DS having like a billion games that are pretty good, figuring out where to start could be a pretty daunting task. So that's why I've taken it upon myself out of the kindness of my ass to try and compile 9 games that you should prioritize getting on the eShop the most. But keep in mind, this is absolutely not about which 9 3DS games are the best on the console, just which ones you should buy in the eShop based on how much some of the prices for physical copies cost in the aftermarket. But I'm also going to lean more towards games that are less likely to be ported over to modern and future consoles, or even games that are just never going to play the same thanks to the 3DS's features, even if they do eventually see ports. And I'm sure a lot of you probably already left comments about how you should just hack your 3DS and get everything for free instead. Whether it be for moral reasons, not wanting to brick the damn thing, or even being on probation and not wanting to go back to the slammer for pirating Nintendo games, there's plenty of people out there who'd rather not mod their 3DSs if at all possible. So without further ado, and in no particular order, let's start with number 1.
Pokemon games. If you own a Nintendo handheld, then it's basically a law that you're required to own at least one Pokemon game, and when it comes to the 3DS, there's certainly no shortage when it comes to this franchise. But as far as which games you should prioritize, well, every Pokemon game's essentially the same thing, more or less. You choose your starter, capture even more Pokemon on top of that, take down an evil gang all by yourself, complete 8 gyms, or island challenges in the case of Sun and Moon, which are barely any different at all, and then you do some post-game shenanigans, and that's pretty much it. So it really just comes down to which Pokemon you want in your party and whether or not you like rollerblading. At the end of the day, though, it doesn't really matter which Pokemon game you choose, but if you don't want to break the Pokemon law and violate your parole, then you'd better pick one up soon, because games from this franchise always end up costing way more in the aftermarket, and the same's bound to happen for the 3DS titles as well. Number 2, WarioWare Gold. WarioWare games may not be everyone's cup of tea, but unless you're some kind of a Winky Goblin or something like that, there's no denying that there's nothing else out there like them. The game's essentially 316 minigames that you play back to back, and none of them take longer than a few seconds, and they all have wacky solutions based on the 3DS's various gimmicks. And since the game was built entirely around the 3DS's gimmicks, it seems pretty certain that it's never going to see the light of day again now that Nintendo's probably moved on. And even though physical copies of the game don't really cost all that much more at the time of this recording, I'd be willing to bet my last shilling that the prices are going to creep up before anyone realizes it. So if you miss your chance of getting a physical, then you should probably get a digital copy before the eShop quits being alive, because if you're only going to get one WarioWare DS game, then this is definitely the one you want since it brought all the best minigames back. Number 3, Dragon Quest 7 and 8. Dragon Quest games are some of the most reliable JRPGs out there, but if you want to get physical copies on the 3DS, then get ready to sell your soul to my buddy Lonnie who's going to resell it to buy pills. Or, you know, if you don't want to spend eternity in purgatory, then you could always just buy them digitally on the eShop for way cheaper. I almost didn't include these games here, because there's no way in hell they're not going to get ported over to other consoles like 5 minutes after I post this video, even with all the upgrades these versions have over their PS2 counterparts. Still though, I just think there's something special about playing these games on the 3DS, and I mean, these probably are going to be the only versions you'll ever get to play in 3D, so, you know, that is something. Number 4, Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure. There's really not much to explain when it comes to rhythm games, but in my opinion, the 3DS really is the perfect place for them thanks to the stylus, and Rhythm Thief in particular is one of the more interesting ones. You play as a jabroni named Raphael who investigates his father's disappearance and Napoleon's resurrection in Paris while dancing and solving puzzles in style. It may not be the greatest game in the history of the universe or anything like that, but it still stands out from other rhythm games, and physicals are expensive as all hell, while digital copies are only $20, and if you're patient, you can usually find it on sale for $10. It is worth noting that they've got a version of this on iOS, but I mean, come on, I'm sure everyone watching this video knows that mobile games are for uncivilized swine, so if you're gonna do digital anyway, then you might as well get this game on the 3DS, you butt wagon. Number 5, Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story and Bowser Jr.'s Journey. This is a remake of a Nintendo DS game from 2009 that nobody ended up buying because it came out way too late in the 3DS's life cycle. Sadly though, the game's developer Alpha Dream really banked on this game succeeding and had to declare bankruptcy when it tanked. Personally, I didn't buy it when it first came out because I was kind of taking a break from collecting at the time and I knew that I wasn't going to play it anytime soon. However, when I realized physical copies were $10 more on eBay, I decided to buy a sealed copy before it was too late, and my god do I feel like the biggest dick ever for doing this. Because not only would it have been cheaper to buy the game when it first came out, but it actually might have helped Alpha Dream stay in business. I mean, not really, because they were over $3 million in debt, but still though, it's the principle of the matter, you know? Buying it digitally now may not bring the company back to life or anything like that, but I mean, I'm sure it'd still do some good. Plus, it is still cheaper on the eShop than buying a new copy, and who knows, by the time you're watching this video, the prices might have gone to the moon. Either way, if you're a 3DS collector, you should probably try to get a hold of this game while you still can. Number 6. Professor Leighton vs. Phoenix Wright. For the first and only time ever, Professor Leighton and Phoenix Wright joined forces in a video game while fusing the puzzle and exploration gameplay elements with the trial mechanics, and the results left most people happy as far as I can tell. But then, for whatever reason, it never happened again, and unfortunately the game became expensive as ass once people found out it existed. I'd be surprised if this game never gets ported someday, but since there's probably some rights issues or whatever, I don't think it's gonna happen in the near future. But hopefully I just jinx myself by saying that, because I'd rather everyone be able to play whatever games they want as easily as possible. Until then, though, the game's pretty cheap on the eShop, so if you want it, that's probably your best bet to get it right now. Number 7. The Yokai Watch Blasters games. Alright, so even though I've always considered to be somewhat on the ball when it comes to new 3DS releases, I honestly never knew that these two Yokai Watch games existed in the first place. And you know what, I'm pretty sure nobody else noticed either based on how crazy the prices for these games shot up in the aftermarket. I decided to give the first Yokai Watch game a chance after seeing that it was even more popular in Japan than Pokemon when I visited back in 2013, but even though I love just about everything about this game, I found the battle system to be pretty damn atrocious, so I kinda ignored the franchise after that. Yokai Watch Blasters, on the other hand, though, is, well, I don't really know for sure, because there's really not a lot of English content about this game outside of a few gameplay videos. I guess the game really was a big secret. But based on all the gameplay videos I did see, it kind of feels like a Yokai Watch Warriors game that wasn't made by the same people who made all the other ones. Apparently it took a part of the gameplay from Yokai Watch 2 and expanded upon it in a spin-off, kind of like how Super Mario 3D World led to Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. All I know is that the very few people who actually did play this game seem to think it's worth giving a shot, but if you do that, then a digital copy seems to be your best bet. Although the Japanese version seems to have Ghostbuster references that were left out in the English version in fear of getting sued, so you might want to consider learning Japanese if you want to save money and experience the true game. I don't know, I guess that's up to you. I know that Yokai Watch 3 is expensive as frig too, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't download that too if Yokai Watch games tickle your fancy, but given that it's a mainline game, I can't imagine that they're never going to port it at some point, and I don't think I could say the same thing for Blasters. Plus, I already broke the rules for Dragon Quest, so I can't do it again, but I don't know, maybe I'm just a dingus though. Number 8. 3D Classics. Rather than just copy and pasting NES games of the 3DS, Nintendo decided to add a little stereoscopic 3D to some of them to spice things up a bit. But then nobody ended up buying them, and Nintendo said frig it and just copy and pasted the rest of their NES games over. And honestly, I can't really say that I blame Nintendo for giving up on the 3D Classics idea, nor do I even blame anybody who didn't feel like buying them. But personally, I think if you're gonna replay a retro game, then you might as well add some kind of a twist to the experience if you don't want to change the gameplay with a full remake. And it's for that reason why these are some of the only 3DS games that actually play in 3D the majority of the time. Sega also gave some of their Genesis games the same 3D treatment, and some of them even got put onto a cartridge that isn't that expensive in the aftermarket, at least not right now anyway. However, the same can't be said for the 3D NES games, and even though it doesn't actually make the games better per se, it does make them feel unique on the 3DS. Once the eShop's closed, you're probably never going to be able to get a hold of any of these games ever again, even if you are rich. Unless, of course, you hack, but don't forget that you're on parole, so don't push it, buddy. And sure, these games might not seem all that special if you got a 2DS, but I swear to God, I feel like Kid Icarus controls like 1,000 times better in the 3DS version. Maybe I'm crazy for thinking that, but I beat this version of the game relatively easily and could barely even make any progress in any other version that I ever tried, so I don't care what anybody says, this version definitely controls way better. Number 9. Pretty much anything developed or published by Atlus. Much like with most consoles, Atlus RPGs were niche at the time they came out, only to become expensive as all hell later on. Atlus made and published so many games on the 3DS that I could have easily made this entire video about which ones you should get in particular on the eShop, seeing as how pretty much all of them are expensive on eBay right now. Like, getting Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse in particular is damn near impossible if you don't want to spend a fortune, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time before both versions of that game find their way to other platforms. So if you ask me, and if you clicked on this video, then you kinda already did, then the Atlus RPGs on the 3DS you should prioritize getting first are the Etrian Odyssey games, as well as Persona Qs 1 and 2. And that's mainly due to the fact that the touch controls for these games are gonna make it pretty difficult to port them to any other console without feeling weird like The World Ends With You. Plus, not only are they way cheaper digitally, especially Persona Q2 in particular, but Persona Q1's physical cartridges had a fair amount of botches among them that caused the game to randomly crash. And if you just so happen to have one of the botched cartridges and decide to play the game after the eShop closes, then not even sending a copy of the cartridge cut in half to Sega will get you a download code, since there's not going to be any way you could possibly redeem it. But anyway, these are the games that I came up with, and I'm sure there's probably one or two that are expensive as hell on eBay and cheap on the eShop, so if you feel like I neglected something, then let me know in the comments.
But anyway, that's all for today, though. If you liked this video, then you might like my video where I did pretty much the exact same thing for the PS Vita. Or, you know, if you're new here, you could watch my old fiasco where I destroyed my Persona Q cartridge for a download code. You'll excuse me, though, I gotta go frame my stepdad for a crime he didn't commit so I could stay up late and watch the Who's the Boss marathon. See you later, crocodiles!
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.